Hi, my name is Landon Dunlap, and this is my second case presentation, which is Palmer versus Merluzzi. So, to give you some background on the case, Dan Palmer was a senior at Hunterton Central High School. Palmer was the starting wide receiver for their football team. And in order to fulfill a course requirement, which is Intro to Broadcasting Technology, he and three other classmates had to complete a assigned course to pass the class. So on that night of September 24th, 1986, him and the three other students went to the school broadcast studio, which was on Hunterdon Central High School property. There was no coach, administrator, or teacher there while they were working in the broadcast studio. The next morning, the school staff found beer cans as well as other drug and marijuana paraphernalia in the radio room. The next day, Palmer was brought into a meeting with Mr. Merluzzi, which is superintendent, Dr. Grimm, which was a principal, and Coach Buckley, which was his football coach at the time. They brought Palmer into question about the things that they found and discovered in the broadcast room. And Palmer would go on to admit sometime in that meeting that he did consume beer and did consume marijuana at the radio station that night. Um, it was then quickly established that by the school board as well as the three people in the meeting that Palmer would be given a 10-day suspension, barring him from stepping foot on campus, whether it be for classes or for extracurricular activities, which would be football in this case. The three other students were given the same penalty. This was agreed on by Palmer's family, and a letter of notice was given to the Palmer family, and they received that a few days later, and that was documented. Following the suspension of Palmer, members of the board questioned if Palmer should be suspended from his extracurricular activities, adding on to the 10-day suspension as well. The Palmer family had a closed session with the school board, and they were obviously strongly against another additional suspension from extracurricular activities. And according to them, that was the last they ever heard of any additional penalties. On the eve of the 10th day of Palmer being suspended from extracurricular activities in school, the superintendent, who was Mr. Merluzzi, gave Palmer a 60-day suspension from extracurricular activities. And of course, the other students were then given the same suspension. The Palmer family, our plaintiffs, said that they didn't receive any notice or fair trial to that 60-day suspension. And they also argued that because of this 60-day suspension, it was doing more harm than good to Palmer because it didn't help him. It enabled him to not be able to get scholarships or potential scholarships from colleges and to play football at the collegiate level. So now we look on the sides of the case. Our plaintiffs, which were the Palmer family, argued that Mr. Merluzzi violated their rights to due process under the 14th Amendment when he proposed to the school board that Dan Palmer serve an additional 60-day suspension from extracurricular activities. So pretty much they're saying that Mr. Merluzzi did not give them any prior notice other than the original 10-day suspension. Therefore, that they did not give Palmer or the Palmers any notice or any heads up on that after that there would be more suspension after these 10 days. And they believe that because of the 14th Amendment and that because he is a citizen of the United States, that he is protected by the United States Constitution, and they are able to receive their due processes. So the defendant's side, which was Mr. Merluzzi, argued that Palmer violated multiple school handbook guidelines, which was the Hunterdon Central High School student guidelines as well as the interscholastic athletics guidelines as well. Merluzzi said that Palmer violated multiple rules regarding destruction of school property, which was the beer cans and the beer stains and the marijuana smell in the broadcasting booth drinking alcohol and using drugs on school campus. Like I previously said, that radio broadcasting booth was located on school campus. Underage drinking, use of illicit drugs, and they also had something in there about um, students should be able to show upstanding citizenship, which I will touch on later. Merluzzi argued that since Palmer violated those guidelines that he was aware about, because every student athlete and every student had to sign off on the guidelines that they read it. I know that I had to do this when I was in high school and I had to do it when I was in college, competing in athletics. Um, and so he had the right to add days onto his punishment if deemed necessary by the school board and if it falls under the guidelines. And because that Dan Palmer already was aware of the guidelines of being a student and a student athlete, that they didn't have to give him any heads up or notice or due process, because it was already agreed upon, and it was already agreed upon by the school board and student athletes that um, if you do violate these guidelines, that you will serve more punishment deemed by the school board. So the court found in favor of Merluzzi, our defendants, and agreed that the notice was sufficient enough. The court agreed that Hunterdon Student Handbook or Hunterdon Central Student Handbook and the Interscholastic Athletic Handbook specified and clearly stated the policies regarding drug and alcohol use on school campus. And then, like I said previously, the handbook also said that no student who fails to demonstrate citizenship would not be allowed to participate in extracurricular activities. And according to um, according to the school board and Mr. Merluzzi, um, Dan Palmer did not show that he was demonstrating good citizenship, so he should not be allowed to participate in any extracurricular activities. It should be noted that Merluzzi and the school board offered to send Palmer to a drug and alcohol rehab center, where he would attend classes a few times a week to lower that suspension. But the Palmer family um, did not accept that and stuck to the 60-day suspension. So, how does this help athletic administrators? I thought it was kind of interesting. So, obviously, this case will help athletic administrators understand that they need to take into account that they are giving students the correct due processes when drafting the guidelines for their handbook. I know that the athletic director or administrator is not 100% in charge of drafting the guidelines for the handbook. It's more of a collective group thing. But everybody needs to be aware that they need to abide by the U.S. Constitution, because I think it's also kind of overlooked that even though they are students in high school and some of them are under the age of 18 and not seen as adults yet, that they still are protected by the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution protects everybody who is a citizen of the United States, and so that whatever applies to adults in the Constitution will also apply to um, people or citizens under the age of 18. So I think it's just an important case to look back on if you ever are drafting guidelines for your handbooks, your student athlete handbooks, that you need to make sure you have built in and specify everything and be very specific, so you don't have to run into a lawsuit like Mr. Merluzzi and the high school did here, Hunterdon High School did here. Thanks.